Back in time, March, April 1976, we're creeping closer and closer to my surviving my business adventure here. Because 76 was the big year for me. But anyway, this particular one won't mean a lot to hardly anybody except one person, Dan Morehead. Okay? Hey, Dan, who's that guy right there? That's Doc, your dad.
Aw, I'll have to send him that. Oh, he was so cute.
Yeah, he was a doctor, and he actually loved to fish. He was Kentucky Lake back then. He was one of the top pros on Kentucky Lake. Dan Morehead, now, of course, him and Mark Mientez were followed in his footsteps a little bit, and he also, besides being a doctor, he designed this new skirt for spinnerbaits, and I'll show you a few of them toward the end. I think he was better looking than you, Dan. No. All right, and here was my first commercial I ever got to be in. And I think, and I'm not being biased here, but I look pretty damn determined. If you look at all the other places. Intense, yeah.
Yeah, everybody else looks pretty laid back.
Laid back, happy, and everything. So, yep, the time has gone by.
Johnny.
Yeah, and that was Johnny's four straight classic finals. See, here's Ray selling his boat again, still $5,895. That's amazing.
I should have bought a bunch.
And here are them testing that Kevlar material they're talking about, and they're really obviously promoting it. Two things at this time that Ray was determined to make work was Kevlar and fly fishing rods. Because you'll see a little bit more right here. This is a fly fishing rod. And Cortland Line is one of his bigger sponsors in these magazines, which they made pretty much strictly fly lines. All right. And here's those lures that Doc Morehead were making. He was just making this skirt, which was kind of cute, but that he would put on the spinnerbait that would have probably, and he was right, had more action than the traditional skirts, the vinyls, the rubber skirts that you put on these type of baits.
He designed all those?
He designed the skirts, yeah. See, Doc Morehead right here, Paducah Tackle Company. Oh, this was kind of one of those prognostications that really was happening. The crankbaits really were starting to show their functionality at being a competitive angler. Like I said, early on, I was inspired by that legend in Texas and started throwing. Hellbenders was my first crankbait, but these were all, different ones. Bagleys I did well on in my career. Won a lot of the big square bills I threw were Bagleys. But it's and Tommy Martin had won the Classic in '74 with fishing, Rebels crankbaits and Bagley, Bossa B. Yeah, Basil, Tommy. And again, Jack bragging about how much money he won, and to me that was a lot. And here's the way all of us guys fished back then. We looked like a big blue heron standing on one leg, and we ran the troll motor standing on one leg, even in rough water. And this guy was one of Johnny Morris's best friends fishing the circuit from Lloyd McIntyre from, I think he's from Illinois. Lloyd McIntyre. Now, a lot of people look at me as a power fisherman, and predominantly that's what I am. I'm what power fisherman, meaning I cover a lot of water, I fish fast, I make a lot of casts, I throw power plugs, crankbaits, spinnerbaits, topwaters. I wasn't a finesse fisherman, most people didn't see, but here's the non-truth in that. In my early career, I always had a Charlie Brewer slider head with a little 4-inch worm on my deck. In a spinning rod, an open face spinning reel, which you see tons of now. There would always be mostly casting reels on my deck, but there would always be at least one Charlie Brewer slider head, little worm on there. And my biggest bass for most of my early part of my career was an 8.5 pound I caught in Florida on that Charlie Brewer slider head. I had it up there because there were 7 fish limits and 10 fish limits, and that little finesse bait would always get me a couple other fish to fill out those big limits. And when it finally disappeared from my deck, unfortunately, and it was for the wrong reason, was when the limits dropped to 5. I didn't think I needed those extra little fish. I had to have all quality fish, and that has become true. But still, the mistake was in my mind was I said this wasn't going to catch big fish, and it does. And the guys are proving it every day out there on the tournament circuit now. These little finesse baits with little jig heads, and this was a flat one. This, unlike all the ones you see now that are round, this was a flat one, and it had a glide down to it. It didn't just fall straight. It had a glided down like a snow skier going down a slope on his skis. So I need to probably put one of those back on my deck. But that is March, April 1976. We're creeping close to the fall.